Jumping to the cut view, we have How Every Story Begins, which is a blank page. This one has the title Blood Harmony at the top, and by Jay Wilburn. Again, always feel free to jump in with any questions or comments as we go along, and let me tell you a story. See what we can do with this. All right. John Eskew stepped out of his 6-year-old Mercedes in front of a unpainted, I'll say mostly unpainted, a mostly unpainted dance hall that was rocking and vibrating with hoots and foot stomps. Okay, need to fix the spelling there real quick, sorry. All right, and foot stomps. Apparently that's not a compound word. Should be. If we used foot stomps more often, it would be a compound word. All right. The faded letters beside the open barn style doors declared this was the cornmeal factory. No, let's say warehouse. It was either an ironic name or what the building had been used for in the past. John spied a few older men, in fading and tearing denim on a log, let's say, leaning on a log fence across the mountain road from the gravel lot. He was glad he had opted not to wear the suit and tie for this official business. He still stood out as someone who did not belong here. They could probably smell the stink of city lawyer off him. From over there. Okay. All right. His car was far nicer than any truck in this lot. It was the oldest any time he parked at the firm. Okay. That was part of the reason. Oh, thank you for the subscribe. I appreciate it. Appreciate having you back too, man. Thanks for being here. All right, that was part of the reason he was here and not one of the partners. They had sent cease and desist orders. They had sent cease and desist orders to every address they could dig up. They had... Getting it done today, huh, Jay? Well, I'm doing my best, man. Once I get going in a story, it's usually pretty good, but figured I'd give it a try, even though I wasn't really 100% today, but feeling pretty good. Oh, gave a gifted sub to Armandro's Amelia there, who's watching on. I appreciate him being here as well. That is, in fact, the Armandro's Amelia, for anyone wondering, the author himself. So now that he has a subscription, he has to come back anytime I'm on. That's part of the rules, I think. I have no idea what that is, but thank you. You get all kinds of perks. We'll talk about it sometime. I'll talk you through it like you're my grandpa or whatever. You can watch without ads. That's part of it too. I also run an ad early on, so people who come in at the beginning don't have to look at ads. They had sent cease and desist orders to every address they could dig up. Let's say they had sent messengers with the first time here. All right, they had sent messengers with actual lawsuit paperwork, but like all the ceases and desists, they had come back without ever finding the town of Bowler. They had tried to call every local sheriff they could track down, and they all said that Boiler was outside their jurisdiction. The ones who had heard of it, this paragraph's probably way too long, but I'm going to finish it off and worry about that during the edit. The ones who had heard of it each thought it was in a different state from them. So now John was here with his two nice clothes, with his two, let's keep it to the car, with his two nice out of date Mercedes. He had at least found this unincorporated, I knew I wasn't going to spell that correctly the first time. I think I left out the N. There we go. All right. He had at least found this unincorporated patch of Appalachia. Alright, let me fix the spelling there. But he had no clue whether he was in Kentucky or West Virginia or some magical place between states and dimensions. As he looked for the bow, as he looked for the home of Melody or Shirley Bow. As he looked for the home of Melody or Shirley Bow, real name Bowler, like most everyone else in town. Let's put town in quotation marks. All right. As he looked for the home of Melody and Shirley Bow, real name Bowler, like most everyone else in town, people directed him to the warehouse where the girls sang, where the girls were to sing with the house band that evening. It was still light, but the party was already in full swing by the sound of things. John slipped through the door and tried to stay close to the walls and off most people's radar. Of course, he failed. Eyes cut to him and nostrils flared like they had located a dead thing that was the source of a persistent smell that had been bothering them for a while. All right. Bothering them for a while. There we go. Eventually, after every eye fell to him, it slid away because even a fancy city interloper like him wasn't a fraction as interesting as the ragged slamming bluegrass music, threatening to blow out the old wooden planks of the warehouse. All right. There were 2 banjo players. Someone pounding away at a piano. There were 2 banjo players. All right, I'm going to make this separate sentences instead of a series. Someone pounded away at a piano. Someone pounded away at a piano as old as the building itself, like the instrument was okay. Say like it was an instrument, like it was a rhythm instrument, like it was a rhythm instrument. There were guitars, fiddles, and several things with strings or valves that John had no name for. Of course, there were jugs, washboards, and other rickrack backing up the more formal instruments. Oh, there was a 3rd banjo player that John had missed in his first survey. Okay. He did not see the singers as the instrumental cascaded onward, as if the players had no idea and maybe no power. Let's say no idea how, and maybe no power to stop this song ever. All right. They were all men. No, he was wrong. 2 women. 2 women as old as the hills played a couple instruments. He was wrong again. There were definitely only 2 banjo players, but way more people on the stage than he first thought. The crowd shook the world with their clapping and foot stomping. All right. Now let's bring in our main characters here. Wait, there they were. Wait, there they were. He did not see them walk onto stage, but they must have, because they slipped out of the shadows into the light at the front, and the crowd went wild seeing them for the first time themselves. John wasn't sure which Beau's sister was which, but the duo was Blood Harmony, and he was here on behalf of Captura Records to serve them papers and notice of the lawsuit against them for their band name. He wasn't sure whether he should drop those papers. Hold on. He wasn't sure if he should drop those papers on the girls themselves or on whoever served as their guardians. Maybe a manager if one showed himself. He couldn't gauge their ages. Over or under, he had no idea. The darker-haired sister could have been 14 or 28. The redhead could have been 12. Could have been 12 or 22. If he thought about it too much, it made him dizzy. Okay. As the crowd finally died down, the band didn't really stop, but the band didn't really stop, but sort of dropped back, lulled, and and then came together in a more coherent tune. It must have been one that the crowd was hoping for and recognized, because they went wild again. John had zero intention of serving papers during the performance. John had zero intention of serving papers during the performance. This posse of fans would likely tear him apart if he did. And as far as he could tell, no sheriff held jurisdiction over this stretch of mountain road between states and between worlds. Not only would no one come to the dirty lawyer's rescue as he tried to sue two lovely young women who just wanted to sing their hearts out. Not only would no one come to the dirty lawyer's rescue as he tried to sue two lovely young women who just wanted to sing their hearts out, but no one would be able to even find the crime scene if they looked. For a moment, he almost bolted from the door with the intention to start driving and keep driving until he found a big city he knew in some other state. They didn't, let's say, Captura Records didn't really have a lawsuit anyway. They were just pissed that this isolated pair that went by Blood Harmony took up more of the internet than the country pop band they had signed with the same name. All right. It's probably a lot of setup, but I think it flows all right. Let me spell sheriff correctly. All right. John stayed. He hung in the back of the hall in a dark corner, but he stayed. All right. Then the girls hit their first note, and he was cold all the way to his soul. Everyone else in the crowd, those who clearly had heard these voices do their thing before, felt it too. He saw a woman and a bearded man nearby shiver at the same time. More than a few people pulled their arms into their sides and folded their hands over their chests as they looked and listened with rapt attention. John felt like that first syllable lasted an eon, but then they were several words into the verse as his mind caught back up with time. The words were packed with meaning and symbolism, but at the same time, the words themselves were meaningless because the sounds were beyond perfect. They truly were blood harmony in a way he had never heard in all his years as a music fan and as a lawyer for music companies. They could have been one voice, but okay, let me make this a new paragraph. They could have been one voice, but they were two souls with distinct sounds that simply matched in a way that many couldn't accomplish in a full studio with auto-tune used at full power. All right. They sung of waterfalls and trails that wound over mountains. They sung of waterfalls and trails that wound over mountains that you knew from generational memory, but were seeing for the first time. They rhymed. I'm gonna make this a new paragraph. Let's make this rapid fire. They rhymed. Okay, I have too many days. Words rhymed that seemed secret and beautiful in their poetry. But then John couldn't recall how they did it. Okay. They sung of a fork in the road and fear that both paths were wrong, or worse, that both paths led to heaven, and taking one robbed them of half a life on the other. Tears stung his eyes, and he fought. Tears stung his eyes, and he fought to hold on to those words because they defined his life. They words that encapsulated all his hopes and fears and other feelings he had no word for, but had felt his entire life. Words that encapsulated all his hopes and fears and other feelings he had no word for, but had felt his entire life, were discovered here today. But he couldn't hold them. All right, let me make that a new paragraph too. But he couldn't hold them. He knew he would lose control of his tongue. He knew he would lose control of his tongue and beg them to sing this song again right away. He needed those words spoken to him again. Not spoken, sung. He needed those words sung to him again. And only by these precious singers. No other voices would ever do. Not hearing this song again, even though it wasn't yet over would be losing half of heaven, like that verse had lamented in harmony with his soul. He could not hold them in his mind or heart, because the next verses were as moving as the last. They sang of a world set against them. A world, let's make it personal, of a world set against you, with the borders eating away every moment. Sorrow steals your sleep. Sorrow steals your sleep. What else? How you fight your whole life to protect your home, only to turn around and find that it has been gone for a long time. It rotted away with time the whole time you fought for it and never really appreciated it. John tried to wipe his eyes. He had to use his whole arm to do it, because the stage was nothing but a blur now. Even as he finished, it was no good. This was a storm brewing in secret inside him for the longest time, and the tears would fall like raindrops for a good while. Sir, that was a line that tear/raindrop metaphor was part of the chorus. My God, it was going to break his heart to hear that again when the chorus came back around. John swooned. He actually swooned. If he wasn't back in a cobwebby corner already, he'd have fallen to the floor for sure. He braced on the wall one way and then the other. He actually lost his balance in two directions. He actually lost his balance in two directions, but managed to keep his feet. How he did so would remain a mystery to him for the rest of his life. The song came out of the chorus, of the final chorus, in that two perfect harmony, and gave one more quiet line about that haunting fork in the road you'd never find again, just like you couldn't go home again. As the girls ended exactly together, the band managed to find the end of the song too. Let's see. Applause. Okay, let me spell applause correctly. Applause. Sorry. Alright, applause thundered to go with the falling rain of tears spotting the dusty floor all through the hall. Applause thundered to go with the falling rain of tears spotting the dusty floor all through the hall. John had kept his feet, but others fell to their knees, and he swore they were speaking in tongues like a charismatic revival service. John went on applauding. But noted there had been no mention of God in those lovely lyrics. All right. The girls thanked the crowd with deep accents that twanged in a way that did not match the beauty of their singing at all. I might need to go back and describe their dresses too, I think. Tell what clothes they're wearing, but I'll save that for the edit. All right, beauty of their singing at all. The band started again, and the girls broke into the next song with perfect timing. Let's say exact. I've used the word perfect several times. With exact timing. The divine nature of their voices. The divine nature of their voices made the flaws of the players in the band stand out worse than John did in this crowd. The mistakes made by the instruments brought up a deep anger in him. He wanted to claw and punch the old musicians, to punish them for being unworthy on the same stage as these angels. He also wanted to drive back into civilization, gather those selfish record executives, tie them up in his trunk, and bring them back here to answer for their crimes by trying to stop this perfect thing that existed in the world. He was willing. Okay, let me make this a new paragraph. In that moment, during that second song of the evening, all right, in that moment, during the second song of the evening, he was willing to join these hillbillies in ripping those men limb from limb. He'd tear out their guts with his manicured fingers. John would gouge their eyes and pull out their lying tongues. Say lying godless tongues from their roots. He'd only stop if they told him to, and not a moment before. If his hands and feet gave out, he would use his teeth to punish them more. If his hands and feet gave out, he would use his teeth to punish them more. By the time he blinked himself back into the present, they were on their fourth number. He forced himself to pay attention. This was not a moment to drift off into his own thoughts. This moment, this music. All right, this moment, this music. This moment, this music. These voices were everything. He was going to soak up every note like it was the fountain of eternal life. This song was actually called Living Water. That was a great name. Blood Harmony was a great name for them too. No other group or pair of singers, let's not say pair, no group or combination, nor combination of singers deserved it more than the Bow Sisters. All right. John spent lifetimes in that dusty, dirty hall. Universes rose and fell as he listened to music that made him believe in God. At least some God that held perfect power over this patch, let's say this postage stamp of land, mostly made up of sloping hillsides and tree-rich mountains. Whoever was responsible for this moment in John's life. He was paying worship. All right. As the final number ended, sometime well into the night, the crowd gave everything they had in that final round of applause. No dry eyes, no voices that weren't already hoarse. I don't know how to spell that kind of hoarse. That's not right. The kind of hoarse where your voice is out. I think there's an A. Yeah, okay. All right, no dry eyes, no voices that weren't hoarse from too much cheering. All right. The sisters bowed in unison. Of course, it was unison. I'll say in unison. Just like everything they did. When they went over with their perfect hair flopping, let's say flying behind them, they couldn't have been a year, let's say a day, they couldn't have been a day over 10 years old. As they rose together with their cheeks flushed with life, with vital life, they looked to be just shy of 30. With sweat glistening over their faces and eyes that spoke of wisdom beyond even the oldest musician in that ancient bluegrass house band. All right. As the others in the room gathered their things, the spell appeared to be broken in them. Maybe they were partially inoculated. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to spell that right. Let me see what I can do with it. All right, inoculated to the power of this performance. John couldn't imagine They were all engaged in good-natured, I'm going to put a dash there. They were all engaged in good-natured conversation about their wonderful evening. As John pushed through them to get to the stage, he caught multiple mentions of blood harmony. Alright, I'm going to put quotation marks here. Blood harmony. Those wonderful girls. Gifts. Hold on. Sorry. Gifts from God. And one man distinctly whispered the words mud music. Alright. And one man distinctly whispered the words mud music as John slid by behind the old fellow's back. He wasn't going to be serving any papers. He wasn't sure what he planned to do when he reached the stage. Maybe he was going to drop to his knees and fold to his face as he worshipped at their feet. Perhaps he was going to offer to be their lawyer, leave his life behind, live in these hills, and defend the true blood harmony to the death. He never got that far, though. Several hands locked onto him and dragged him sideways toward the open barn doors. His feet never really touched the ground once until they had him outside. Say, like before, a few folks cast him a look, but then found other things to hold their interest. Outside The evening was wonderfully cool in comparison to the sultry heat from all those bodies and lights inside. All right. They took him around the corner and into the shadows in that last instant in the light, he recognized the old men from across the road. They were much stronger than they had looked before dark, and they hadn't looked all that feeble before. All right, let me spell feeble correctly. They dropped him onto a soft clump of clover and weeds behind the warehouse. The pause that followed was so long that John started to get up on his own. All right. Insects sang their disharmonic no, they don't sing. Hold on. Insects made their disharmonic music shrill through the dark night. Other voices came muffled through the board walls above him. The wind whispered through branches deeper in the darkness. All these sounds were imperfect. After what he heard tonight, not even the voices of nature could compare. It made him angry. He was furious at the world for singing so poorly, and at these men for taking him away from perfection. before he could get off his hands and knees, they went to work on him with their hands, let's say fists, with their fists, knees, and boots. It wasn't long before John curled up and tried to survive the onslaught. These men pounded on him with a relentless rhythm that reminded him of that gnarly piano player. They, attacked John and missed each other like they were beating down a spike into the ground with practiced precision. His eyes swelled. Let's say his eyes. Yeah, we'll do it swelled. His eyes swelled closed. He choked on his own blood. And something hot broke open inside his gut. He wished for death, but unconsciousness finally came as a consolation prize. All right. He woke up multiple times during the night in that patch of weeds where they left him. He couldn't judge at the time because he couldn't get his eyes opened before he passed out again. When he finally came to, why is it saying it's misspelled? It's not. When he finally came to and couldn't drop back out to hide from the pain any longer, he used his fingers to force his swollen eyes open. He almost needed to cut them like a fighter trying to see again. But he got enough of a slit open for each one that he could see the first hints of dawn behind the trees and over the severe hills. All right. Getting to his feet again was no small effort. All his joints hurt. His lower back could take no pressure. Even the weight of leaning too far one way or the other. Even too far one way or the other. All right. One elbow wouldn't straighten, and one knee really didn't want to bend where it had swollen up tight inside his pant leg. He shuffled around the building, getting splinters in the heel of his hand as he tried to use the outside wall. I'll say the long outside wall. Long outside wall for support. Okay. As he reached the front, that hot, deeply wounded feeling in his gut swirled again. John feared something had been ruptured, and that John feared something had been ruptured and that he would die here anyway. His Mercedes was the only vehicle left in the lot. The barn doors were closed, and padlocked with a chain that looked thick enough to tow a battleship. He was surprised to see his car intact. No broken or cracked windows. No dents. No scratches. And no flat tires. John felt around his pockets with his good hand, but didn't find his keys. He tried the handle, and the driver's door opened. Let's say he felt his wallet still in place, but no keys. All right. He tried the handle, and the driver's door opened. He knew he had locked it. The keys were in the ignition and waiting for him. He knew he hadn't left them there. John had trouble moving his neck. Say turning. Had trouble turning his neck. John had trouble turning his neck, but as far as he could see, nothing had been taken or moved inside his car. The old men from the fence seemed happy to let him drive away if he still could. He wrestled with the door, his seatbelt, and the ignition, but got the car started and put in reverse. Anger rose up inside him. On top of that hot swirl of ruptured injury in his gut. He took deep breaths over swollen lips that were split in at least 3 places. A few of his teeth hurt. Let's say stung. A few of his teeth stung as he sucked breath over them. He didn't have the heart to feel if any of them were cracked or broken. He decided he would he decided he would be charging medical expenses to the firm. That cost would be passed on to Captura Records as well, he was sure. Okay. I know this story's rolling right along, but I feel good about it, so I'm going to feel it through here. All right. John managed to fight back tears before they came. He feared they would sting too much, and he could barely see as it was. Okay. He revved backward, where he heard and felt the log fence break apart on his trunk and bumper. Looks like, he supposed they had left his car intact for nothing. It felt good to rob those old hillbillies of their favorite leaning spot. Give them a little something to remember him by. Give them a little something to remember him by. It was a small retaliation, but for now, that was all he had in him. Okay, let me put these back together here. All right. As he drove slowly along the winding road with steep rises and falls, he decided he wasn't done with these rednecks or their singing offspring. The spell from last night was broken. The spell from last night was broken, along with possibly a couple of his teeth. John took this personally now. John took this personally now for obvious reasons. Whatever they had, he would take it. What they couldn't give, he would see them imprisoned for it. Those girls might be lovely singers, but they would never see a dime that John what that noise was, but they would never see a dime that John didn't take from them for this. He had just been here to serve papers. The case probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. He enjoyed the music. He clapped and cheered along with them, along with the rest of the poor hill people. There was no reason to treat him like this. If no sheriff wanted a part of this, then he'd get the state boys involved and would help them find the town. If they didn't already know where it was. Okay. He tried the radio, but all he got was screaming preachers. He tried the radio. He tried the radio, but all he got was screaming preachers and twanging bluegrass. None of it was transcendent. He wondered if music would ever move him again anywhere close to how it did the previous night. He started to feel tears trying to escape again, so he rolled down his window to get more air than the vents were offering him. That's when he heard it. John slowed down to little more than an idle. Those voices were unmistakable. He didn't recognize the song carrying over the hills and through the gullies, but there were no other voices like those two. Morning practice. Well, see, I haven't had him talk this entire time, so maybe I don't have him say anything. We'll just have him think it. Morning practice. He wondered. Okay, morning practice, he wondered. Maybe you couldn't get that good without practice, even with God-given blood harmony. He hesitated at the dirt road for just a moment, but then made the turn. The weather had been dry, so even though his car bottomed out a few times on the eroded path, he never got bogged down. He passed houses that seemed to be built off of trailers, some with multiple floors, some that defied physics. He passed houses that seemed to be built off of trailers, some with multiple floors, some that defied physics, and looked to be added upon for generations of families. How that stapled and pasted together trash stayed whole was a mystery to him. But John was focused on something else. The woods appeared to be closing in on him, but those voices still lay ahead. The light through the branches took on an odd blue tone that made him think of later in the day instead of the morning he knew it was. All right, cruising right along here. We're in the home stretch now. The last shack appeared to be made of the same boards. The last shack appeared to be made of the same boards as that old warehouse. There was a tire swing, of course. Those girls, the sisters, Melody and Shirley. Well, let me put comma there. Sat on the warped steps in what appeared to be burlap, say matching burlap dresses. They held each other's hands as they sang into each other's faces. It was just as lovely as the night before. John stopped in the grass and fought his way out of his seatbelt. Maybe it was more lovely because he was the only one here besides that harmonizing duo. He felt his back pocket and was surprised to find the legal papers there. John actually smiled as much as his ruined lips would allow. John actually smiled as much as his ruined lips would allow. And he imagined himself walking into the partners' offices looking like this and telling them he had successfully served the papers. They say the pages were creased and a little smeared with dried sweat, but they were legible if these two or their folks could actually read. He checked the glove compartment and found the modest handgun still there. He opened it with an effort and found it still loaded. John carefully shoved it into his back pocket. He couldn't submit to another beatdown if it came to that, but he also wasn't keen on getting into a shootout with people who probably hunted for their supper on the regular. He got out, made sure no one else was lurking about, and limped toward the porch and the singing sisters. They sung of the end of the road, the closing of days, finding something to be thankful for in the midst of suffering. And the beauty of learning things the hard way. It was easily as beautiful as any song he heard the night before. It was just as deep and just as tone perfect. It would haunt him like every lyric he'd experienced yesterday. Still, seeing them sing in locked harmony, staring rapt into each other's faces, struck him as creepy and unnatural. Now that morning had dawned and light filtered blue into this isolated yard. In this isolated yard of this sagging old shack. John supposed that getting beaten half to death and left getting beaten half to death and left for dead on the side of a road. Took a lot of the magic out of the local music scene. Okay, that's good. Then he heard the rustling all around. It conflicted with the beauty of the song and brought anger up through his center again. The rustling did not match the wind. So he turned his whole body to see because his neck would not cooperate. Excuse me just a second, I'm going to get a drink of water. All right. They emerged all around him. He struggled to get the gun loose from his pocket without shooting himself in the backside. When it wouldn't come free, he dropped the legal papers in the grass and tore his pants to get the gun out. Then anger melted into cold fear. The people closing in on him from all sides were as blue as the filtered light. Some had dark holes where their eyes should be. Others had black pits that opened into their skulls where their noses used to be. They groaned and shuffled and reached for the lawyer who presumed to silence the music. Silence the music. All right. presume to silence the music. He got off most of the shots, say most of the rounds, from the loaded gun. The ones that hit heads brought the shambling men down. Other bullets just tore through bone and decaying flesh with no reaction. They brought him down to the ground again. They brought him down to the ground again. He didn't have much fight left in him, but he kicked and screamed as they bit and clawed into him. The whole time, he could still hear the music. After the spurt of violence had ended, these oldest citizens of Bowler stood and swayed quietly with the morning performance. Some of them still had bits, we'll say bits, of moist black soil in the folds of their rotting clothes and clinging to the last wispy strands. Alright, let me spell wispy correctly. The last wispy strands of their hair. John eventually stood too. A little more blood spilled from the wide open wounds in his body, but that burning sensation in his gut was gone. He stood on the ruined folds of the legal papers, but paid them no mind. All right, let me save what I got real quick before I finish. All right. John Eskew swayed with the music as well. So the music never left his ears. It spoke to his soul. John Eskew swayed with the music. For a good long while.